Today, I want to talk about corporate welfare, particularly corporations and greedy business executives, oligarchs, that get rich off of stuff like government funding of science. They take government funding of science, corporate welfare, then they get rich off of it and then keep all of the money for themselves. One example of this is Super Soaker. Do you guys remember the toy Super Soaker, the squirt gun? I think it's still a toy, but I remember this was a big thing. It really blew up in the 1990s. You guys remember Super Soakers?
Did I forget to invite you to the pool party? Well, maybe next year.
What a bitch.
On those occasions when you need to make a big splash, there's the Super Soaker 100. It has a powerful air pressure system.
Oh, Buffy!
Ah, yeah, take that, bitch. It's what you get.
A range of up to 60 feet.
Yeah.
And a drenching spray.
How much fun you can have with these squirt guns.
The Super Soaker 100.
It's a water gun of a higher caliber.
Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but Super Soaker is one of these examples of corporate welfare. Did you guys know that Super Soaker relied on government funding of science to invent their fancy squirt guns that they made a lot of money off of? Here is a bio video from Great Big Story from 2016. 1.5 million views on YouTube. It's about the NASA scientist who invented the Super Soaker. And it looks like YouTube will not allow me to upload this portion of the video, which means you'll have to either take my word for it or watch this YouTube video on your own time. See, he was working for the Air Force on the taxpayer dime. He even wrote about this, an article for Fox News back in 2018, I think, by Lonnie Johnson. Yeah, 2018. How the Super Soaker inventor keeps toys and millions of other products in the pipeline, protect the patent system. He mentions in this story about how the story of the Super Soaker is a story of hard work that was incentivized by protected patents. Actually, it sounds to me more like a story of fleecing the taxpayers, saying, I conceived of the idea of the Super Soaker while still employed as a NASA engineer, and I built a prototype and tested it in my bathroom. So are you guys getting this? From what I've read on this topic, Lonnie Johnson ended up inventing the Super Soaker while working on government programs using taxpayer money, government-funded science. Oligarchs like Lonnie Johnson built his career on the taxpayer dime, working at NASA, doing experiments for the U.S. Air Force on the taxpayer's dime, then was doing experiments, and then, he turned some discovery he made while doing these experiments. He turned it into toys that would end up making him tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. And I'm over here thinking to myself, excuse me, isn't that our money? Shouldn't the Super Soaker, he wants to talk about like patents, shouldn't the Super Soaker, shouldn't that be in the public domain since he used the taxpayer dime, government-funded science to discover the Super Soaker? Is it fair that someone like Lonnie Johnson does science on the taxpayer dime and then uses that science to make millions of dollars for himself? What a corrupt criminal system we live in, folks. Okay, in all seriousness, I'm actually grateful for Lonnie Johnson. I loved playing with Super Soakers when I was a kid, and I'm genuinely happy that someone got filthy rich making toys that I enjoyed. And some of you guys might be thinking that I'm exaggerating. Some people might be thinking, nobody would ever make the stretch that I just did with Lonnie Johnson and imply that Super Soakers are an example of corporate welfare and oligarchs exploiting the taxpayers for a profit. Well, then we have people like Robert Reich, who teaches policy at Berkeley. He's one of the beloved economists of the left. He has 1.5 million followers on Twitter. The other day, Robert Reich tweeted, the federal government gave Moderna $2.5 billion to develop a COVID vaccine. Meanwhile, Moderna CEO just walked away from the company with $926 million in a golden parachute. This is what an oligarchy looks like, according to Robert Reich. It's not just Robert Reich saying this. We also have Bernie Sanders, Senator Bernie Sanders, two-time candidate for the presidency of the United States. He talked about this in a recent video.
The CEO of Moderna recently received, got this, a $926 million golden parachute.
Boo!
Now, can you believe it? We are fighting.
Can you believe it?
And struggling to make sure that our people are vaccinated in this country and around the world. Federal government puts $2.5 billion into Moderna to develop a vaccine, and this guy walks away above and beyond his other stock with over $900 million.
Just walks away after $2.5 billion in government assistance. He just walks away with $900 million.
Golden parachute.
Boo!
That is how corrupt and criminal the system is. It is so out of control that it really, literally is hard to believe.
All right. So let's talk about the golden parachute for a minute. Let's talk about, so Bernie Sanders is relying on this article. If you watch the video, he's citing an article from Fierce Pharma by Kevin Dunleavy from March 11th of 2022 this year. Here's the article that Bernie Sanders is relying on. Moderna CEO Stefan Bancel, I think I'm saying his name right, set for a soft landing as his golden parachute swells to $926 million, saying that the company's board of directors has approved of a golden parachute for Bancel worth more than $900 million, his reward for guiding Moderna as it successfully developed and supplied a COVID vaccine. The windfall was reported this week in the company's proxy statement. During its transformational year, Moderna revenues went from $800 million in 2020 to $18.5 billion last year as it manufactured and delivered more than 807 million doses of the mRNA shot. Moderna expects to make even more this year, projecting $22 billion. Going on to say that before the pandemic, Bancel's change in control package amounted to $9.4 million, but that changed with Moderna's star turn. His new deal includes stock worth $922 million, a severance payment of $1.5 million, and a bonus of $2.5 million if the company is sold or if he is fired. This was also reported in an article around the same time by Spencer Kimball for CNBC, reporting the same details. So let's talk about the golden parachute. One, most of this golden parachute is based on stock options, which means that one, again, he only gets the money if he is either terminated or if the company is sold. And two, he only gets the cash money if he ends up selling the stock afterward. And what Bernie Sanders and Robert Reich, what they make it sound like is that Moderna just took $2.5 billion in taxpayer money, and that a big chunk of that just went to the CEO. You know, he even mentions that. Watch it again.
People have $500 million into Moderna to develop a vaccine, and this guy walks away.
To my knowledge, he still is the CEO of Moderna, so he has not walked away yet.
Above and beyond his other stock with over $900 million.
That's the way Bernie is framing it. Now, Bernie is right. We do live in a corrupt system. We have a system where the government taxes its citizens to fund institutions like the National Institute of Health and a variety of public institutions like universities. in the name of funding science, in the name of progress, in the name of helping society, in the name of building a better future or a better tomorrow or whatever fancy language they package this in. That's bad enough. Even a lot of mixed economy moderates support this malarkey. But what was this $2.5 billion for? This was reported in an article in USA Today from November of 2020 by Ali Klaus. Fact check: Moderna vaccine funded by government spending with notable private donation. In this article, it talks about how several government entities contributed to the development of the Moderna vaccine, according to the New England Journal of Medicine report. The report acknowledged that the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, two of the centers that make up the National Institutes of Health, an agency of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, or BARDA, an arm of the HHS, also heavily invested in the vaccine's development, according to a report from Harvard. All in all, U.S. agencies committed about $2.5 billion to help Moderna's vaccine and buy doses, according to the New York Times. Now, first off, what was the scale of this contribution? Because people like Robert Reich and Bernie, what they do is they throw out these large numbers at you, especially numbers pertaining to NIH funding, National Institute of Health funding. But what they don't tell you is the amount of private funding that went into such research. I talked about this in my video, how the FDA saved Americans from affordable drugs, about how the vast majority of pharmaceutical and healthcare R&D comes from the private sector. According to a report from Brookings in 2018 by Liz Sublick, talks about how the private sector, including pharmaceutical companies, venture capital firms, and other impact investors, devoted at least $160 billion to investments related to healthcare and research development annually. Then there was this report from the Congressional Budget Office in April of 2021. Talks about how in 2019, the pharmaceutical industry spent $83 billion on research and development. That's and then later in this article, it talks about how NIH annual funding is roughly at about $40 billion, which is about half, according to this article, half of what the pharmaceutical industry spends. Euron Brook also did a segment last year in response to a segment on Sam Seder. He debunked this notion that mRNA technology was all funded and thanks to funding from NIH. Euron Brook was relying on this article from Stat News in November of 2020, the story of mRNA. Talks about how one of the lead researchers, Caitlin Carrico, spent the 1990s collecting rejections. Her work attempting to harness the power of mRNA to fight disease was too far-fetched for, get this folks, government grants, corporate funding, and even support from her own colleagues. And now that mRNA is hot and the real deal, you have a lot of people trying to credit the government and government funding for mRNA technology, totally ignoring the role of the private sector and people in the private sector. This article on PolitiFact from November of 2020 also talks about this. Written by Miriam Valverde, talks about how the federal government committed up to $955 million to Moderna for the development of a COVID vaccine. In April, Moderna said it was getting $483 million from the government, and that money would be used for late-stage clinical development programs and to scale up vaccine manufacturing. In July, Moderna said it got commitment for an additional $472 million. And why does it need money for clinical trials? Why does Moderna need money for stuff like clinical trials? Because it's required by the Food and Drug Administration. That beloved FDA that you guys read about in history books at public school, the FDA that was brought to you by progressive era heroes like Teddy Roosevelt and Upton Sinclair, which has expanded to the point where if you want to bring a new drug or even a vaccine to market, you have to spend tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, in some cases billions of dollars, on clinical trials to show that the new drug, the new vaccine, is efficacious. So then when the government decides to cover the cost because, hey, we're in an emergency situation, Bernie Sanders tries to frame it as a corporate welfare, which I guess is not entirely wrong, but funding would be unnecessary in a free market. Remember this next time some socialist asshat tries to talk as if we have a free market in medicine. We don't. Article goes on to say in November, the announcement of the vaccine's efficacy, Moderna CEO Stéphane Bancel thanked partners at BARDA and Operation Warp Speed, who have been instrumental to accelerating our progress to this point. Moderna said that if it received emergency use authorization, it expected to have approximately 20 million doses of the vaccine ready to ship in the United States by the end of 2020. Moderna is under contract with the federal government to produce and deliver 100 million doses of the vaccine, which was co-developed with government scientists. The deal allows the government to acquire up to 400 million additional doses. Overall, the HHS said that the federal government is spending approximately $1.5 billion to help make and deliver Moderna doses. And this was all done. These Moderna contracts with the government, this was all done in the name of ensuring that every American has access to a vaccine. Meanwhile, going back to the Bernie Sanders video, he's making it sound like Americans are still struggling to get a vaccine.
Parachute. Now, can you believe it? We are fighting and struggling
to make sure that our people
are vaccinated in this country and around the world. Federal government puts $2.5 billion into Moderna to develop a vaccine.
Yeah. Meanwhile, a big part of that $2.5 billion investment that Bernie is raving about in this video was made in the name, this investment was made in the name of providing every American with a vaccine. Convenient how Bernie Sanders does not mention this. Such context might make it difficult for Bernie to demonize the CEO of Moderna. Now imagine if we had a free market in medicine. First off, many lives probably would have been saved. All of the people who died from COVID while waiting months and months for clinical trials to clear for the FDA to give the rubber stamp on emergency use authorization. Way to go, guys! You regulatory status. Meanwhile, Moderna probably could have gotten some investment from the private sector, as I demonstrated earlier, even in our stupid-ass mixed economy. Big Pharma still gets a crazy amount of investment from the private sector. We know that billionaires like Bill Gates, he has a big boner for vaccines. Bill Gates probably could have wrote a check for $2.5 billion and still made a good return on the investment. In fact, it probably would have cost less than $2.5 billion because they would not have had to go through all of the required FDA clinical trials. We know that Moderna's stock value has went through the roof the last couple of years. As I've talked about before, mRNA technology is already being used, being developed for other treatments, and has a ton of money-making potential. I imagine in a free market, private insurance companies and employers would probably happily foot the bill for vaccines. Even on a surface level, $2.5 billion of investment, you can make a 20% profit by selling, say, 100 million doses at $30 a piece. Now, some of you guys might be thinking, oh, $30, but what if some Americans cannot afford the $30 to pay out of pocket? Well, then let's just have the taxpayers foot the bill for stuff like testing, production, and distribution. Well, when that happens, oops, the stock market, the stock value of the company that we just subsidize in the name of making sure everyone has access to a vaccine, the stock value of that company just went through the roof, making the CEO's stock options more valuable. As a result, But when that happens, then Bernie Sanders says, what a corrupt system we live in. Well, you guys cannot have it both ways, folks. This is all part of this you did not build that mentality that Barack Obama and Elizabeth Warren, they started pushing this notion over a decade ago, saying stuff like, well, if you move your products, if you're a large corporation or a billionaire and you move your products on taxpayer-funded roads and you hire workers, if your workforce is composed of workers who were educated on the public dime, on the taxpayer dime, then did you really build your company?
Blow it out your ass.
You see this a lot with welfare status. They demand stuff like a social safety nets, demand benefits like food stamps, bridge cards, government-sponsored health insurance policies for low-income workers. Then, when it so happens that a lot of low-income Americans work for greedy corporations like Walmart or McDonald's, then people like Bernie Sanders act like the corporations are the problem. Excuse me, did the corporations, did they go lobby Congress for these social safety nets? And I say even more reason to start rejecting the welfare state. If people like Bernie Sanders, if they're going to use the welfare state as an excuse to demonize successful Americans and producers, perhaps going as far to justify insanity, like wealth taxes, other new taxes, more wealth redistribution schemes and programs that Bernie is known for doing, then I say maybe it's time we start thinking about abolishing the welfare state so that people like Stephanie Bonsall or Lonnie Johnson or the Walton family don't exploit the American taxpayers for a profit. Man, totally ruined. Look at Buffy. She's talking to this guy with his shirt tucked in. Like she's really trying to, meet her soulmate at this party she's hosting. She's probably been thinking all week, thinking about this. What am I going to say to this guy? She's nervous. Is he coming to my party? Is he not coming to my party? Oh, I hope he doesn't stand me up. I'm gonna keep the nerds like these two guys. I'm gonna make sure to keep them out because I don't want them. I don't want them making me look uncool to the guy I'm trying to impress. And there she is. She's been thinking about this all week. I'm finally going to talk to the guy of my dreams at my party, my pool party. No uncool losers will be there.
Pressure system.
Oh, Buffy.
Oh, man. Ruined. Totally. Her life has not been the same since. She probably has lost sleep. Buffy has lost sleep over her party. I don't even know if it's a birthday party. Could be Sweet 16. That's the kind of havoc you can wreak on Super Soakers.
Oh, Buffy.
I wonder how Lonnie Johnson feels now. He's like, I'm going to ruin so many teenage girls' dreams and parties with my invention. You have to be a nerdy guy to, go work at places like NASA and invent stuff. He probably kept, I'm like, this is for the nerds, right? Lonnie Johnson. He's like, this is my revenge. Because he probably got he probably got kicked out of a pool party when he was a kid by some cool girl trying to impress another guy. He's like, I'm going to get back all those fucking bitches. This is for all the nerdy guys. Now you guys have a chance for your revenge.
Oh, Buffy.
Vogger says, could be a bat mitzvah. We don't judge. Yeah, I don't know what kind of party this is. You know what? You know what this is? You know what this probably is, now that I think about it? This probably wasn't a birthday party. This is probably a cult if they're drinking Kool-Aid. This is probably a death cult, a suicide cult. And these super soaker kids, these nerds, they probably saved a bunch of lives these days by ruining the party.
Oh, Buffy.
Get that Kool-Aid out of your hand, bitch. Save that guy she was talking to. He was about to he's about to unknowingly commit suicide by drinking Kool-Aid that this cult leader, Buffy, probably put some poison into. Thinking, we're going to go to outer space. And then the super soaker nerds, they're like, nah, not today, bitch. Man, look how proud he looks. Look at him turn at the camera like, yeah, that's right. It's what you get for slamming the door on me, Buffy. Oh, man. And meanwhile, this guy's eating all the grapes. They only had one super soaker. He's like, okay, you ruined the party, and I'm going to go get some snacks.